Thanks. Right, so talking about this Zulip thing, let's have a look. Right, so we've got what the idea is you have streams for different areas. So basically, like there'd be channels in Slack, or groups in IRC, or whatever it is, chats in IRC. But within each one, you can start different threads. So this hasn't got a very good example so far. But let's say, for example, I wanted to ask a question. Let's see, we've got a general one over here. So what's your question? And I can try and give you a straight answer here.
Oh, well, it's just about how we should use it for teamwork between us, because there is always messages on the Slack, Matrix, IRC, and if we want to use Zulip a little bit more, how we could and what kind of messages we could use, we should send through Zulip.
Right. So for example, what I've seen it being used as is you'll have your stream set up, for any particular areas. And then within that, you start a new topic as you need them. So for example, if I had, let's say I already had a stream for, this, for the template formula. I don't have one right at the moment. Actually, let's just create one. How do I create a stream? Right. So that would be following the other structure there. It would be GitHub template formula. So let's close that for a minute here. So what I've done so far is I've set this Docker formula stream up as an example of what we can get the sort of automatic conversations coming in from GitHub. But say we wanted to continue somewhere and have a direct conversation, we can see everything here, and then we can start discussing by, replying here or starting new topics here. So let's say I've got a question here in the template formula and someone comes along, coming from GitHub, we ask them to come into Zulip and discuss anything about the template formula here. So they can say, how do I use the template? And they ask their question, I see the green button, but what next? And so they send that through, and then, people can reply to that particular topic, but someone else might come in the meantime with another question is, where's the pillar? Where's the pillar example? And while it looks like it's mixed up, sorry, I'm just trying to do this too quickly for my own good. So they're asking a question over here, someone's come along, but I want to respond to this one over here. I can look at that particular topic and just keep discussing, see the README for more info. And that then, if you go to the overall template formula stream, all of it's still there in order, in chronological order, but you can actually view each topic, all these little discussions that are going off on different tangents. You can go into each one of them and just read those separately. Yeah. And if you was to go to recent topics, for example, those topics are grouped over here. So what you can do is per formula, you can have a stream per formula with lots and lots of topics running, which could match up with the GitHub issues or the PRs, or just separate, discussions people want to have about that formula. But then you can have more general topics as well, where, something more at organizational level, questions that might come in about those. So I was saying is I could set up, use the API here to set up a stream for every single formula. And because everyone has a GitHub anyway who's interacting with us, and Zulip here has GitHub integration, all they do, they come to the Zulip, hopefully hitting through this link over here, and they'll be offered the chance to just log in using GitHub, and they continue the conversation as we've been having in GitHub anyway. Was that a decent enough explanation?
Yes, it's completely enough for me. Okay.
Yeah, so the idea is the way it splits up the lots of topics per stream. It makes it so much easier to follow long lasting conversations. Whereas, maybe in Slack, when you've got a set of replies and they've scrolled off the screen and then trying to find where was that reply and what was it about, it's very difficult to navigate. Whereas what we found, or what I've found using Zulip with other people and other communities, is it's so easy to track back through the history and to continue specific discussions that you have. And it's easy just to support people and to give each other advice and stuff. So even, for example, the CI, where, whenever I need to go back and have a look at what's been going on with a specific formula CI, the whole history of everything that's gone on there is still kept. So, this isn't just, this is the stream, and every topic has its own history there. So if I looked at the whole stream, I'll see the chronological of all the CI activity across the whole formulas organization, which is a bit hard to follow. As you can see, I can't even scroll down it at the moment. It's a bit heavy. But if I can look at it chronologically, or I can go to a specific formula and have a look what's been going over there. So it just organizes the discussions or the feedback or the information in a much more digestible format.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. So I can still do that if we're interested in doing that. I haven't concentrated on that so far.
Well, I'm not sure we should open a stream for every formulas, because there is lots of formulas, and I think we should open them from time to time based on use.
Okay.
In my opinion.
So you'd have a stream for what would the stream be? Just for example, what would you call the stream?
And if I want to start working and thinking on a specific formula, I don't know if I can open new stream for a formula I'm working, but opening them on demand instead of all of them in one time.
Oh yeah, the reason why I was suggesting to do it immediately is what it was is because you can put the GitHub integration with Zulip immediately. You can already see here as if conversations are already taking place. So this is showing all the activity taking place from a user perspective in the Docker formula. And then by having that out there already, where the streams are set up, we can then continue the discussions in them because they're already prepared. And the search is there. You don't have to sit there navigating through this over here. You just search for whatever you want, and you should be able to find it quite easily, whether it's a stream or whether it's, the CI or whatever. But like I said, I haven't followed this through so far. It's just an idea for the longer term, because, like I said, not everyone's on Slack. And, a lot of times we've maybe requested people to come in that direction. Not everyone's been very keen. And then we do lose history as well, or I know that's changing soon. And it's just quite fragmented because there's so many formulas. And then if there's discussions taking place in there, it's quite difficult to track. Whereas we can just keep things in little organized blocks over here. Anyway, it's not anything critical or urgent right now. We can come back to that. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So the first item was, this documentation is pretty much ready to go in terms of being implemented, put out there, at least starting up. But what it is the discussion from last week as well, I think we started or 2 weeks ago, was having a domain for it instead of using this particular URL, because we've got a lot of needs for a domain anyway, whether it's, applying for other open source licenses or whatever it might be. So if we can get that sorted out now, we can put this within that domain straight away. So I did ask questions. I went around to people independently and asked, and there were some quite interesting ideas that we should maybe consider. I'm just trying to have a look at some of them over here. One was the idea with the saltproject.io, but that's not really viable. Whereas one question was, is the salt stack name? Yep.
Well, what was that idea? Actually,
the question was, could we use saltproject.io? Could we join in with saltproject.io? And
yeah, do you mean like a subdomain or
yeah, of course,
yeah,
of course.
Actually, I was going to suggest that as well, which I didn't get around to.
Sage, can I just trouble you to answer that again, please, rather than paraphrasing what you said?
Oh, sure. About the domain.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was doing something else and distracted, so I'm just not paying attention. Yeah, so we think that it would be best, especially that the project is separate from the main project, but even though we want to closely collaborate, that to give it that domain name would make it look like it is part of that main project. So that those optics we want to be fairly careful about. Plus, if you're going to keep the name in GitHub, we definitely advise keeping a similar name on your URL and domain.
Okay. Okay, thanks for that. And actually another question for you, just while we're at it. Someone
Sure.
suggested after the VMware acquisition, is SaltStack only being used for the enterprise project now? Is SaltStack still being used somewhere? The name SaltStack?
It is. So the original enterprise product was called SaltStack Enterprise. And so now it's been renamed to SaltStack, a really long name for config and for SecOps. And so that name is taken, but where you guys have had that name with a hyphen, we believe that we can get an exception for that and then just continue to work really closely. And
So,
I don't know of anything that needs to be formally in place yet. I'm still trying to understand that, but I will work
so
towards that.
it would have to be with a hyphen, you're suggesting?
It would need to be with that hyphen, the SaltStack formulas.
Okay, and even over here, like the title over here should really be with a
No,
hyphen,
that's
yeah?
okay.
Oh, that's
That's
okay,
okay.
but the actual domain should be something like SaltStack formulas. Sorry, SaltStack hyphen formulas.
It should be
Okay,
I would
All right.
think
match.
formulas would
Yeah.
also be good.
what's that?
I would also think that salt formulas would be good.
Yeah, that's come up a lot of times here. The only problem we've had with that, or the only problem that keeps coming up, is the other organization that's there. So we're under SaltStack formulas, but this is salt formulas over here. And we're tossing between, are we going to create more confusion by now using salt formulas for our domain?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'll just point out that our understanding is that this other organization is basically defunct. That's my understanding. No longer maintained.
Well, it's being updated. Well, only a couple of, but they're still being updated to some extent. So I don't know if they're defunct, but I mean, there was that idea about should we be joining up together? And in that case, then would salt formulas really be a problem? Because then we're all under one umbrella, if that ever was to take place.
Yeah, that would be okay because it's the open source name and that's fine.
Is that better? Would it be better to be salt formulas rather than SaltStack formulas?
Well, that's kind of up to you guys.
I think
to
it's worth
decide.
exploring. I'd probably
Yeah.
But I mean, we wouldn't have to rename this. I mean, this is the one that I think would be a nightmare, trying to actually change this over to something else. I mean, if we can keep this named as SaltStack formulas and keep that GitHub, as in like that area one, the GitHub in the central
that's
place.
fine.
But otherwise, maybe just use salt formulas as the name of our domain and stuff. Would that be, would that be workable?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah, because that suggestion came up from a few. I mean, that kept coming up, maybe saltformulas.org. The idea of using a .io also came up, but the prices, I think, are prohibitive. It costs a lot more to renew every year, much more than a .org. So
Yep.
I'm thinking the best one really, and this is what I'm asking, is if we just go for saltformulas.org. Or
Yeah, I
stack
think
salt,
that's
or is that better? Salt formulas, is that more safer long term?
safer. That's a good question. I think it's worth taking to everyone within this group and to reach out to that salt formulas that is running in GitHub as well to try to join forces because it looks like there's probably some collaboration that could happen there. But I think that's fine. I would just want to, I mean, if it was me, I would probably want to just collaborate with them and ask.
Yeah, no,
Well,
we did.
Yeah, just to explain, I mean, we have actually, they have joined this working group meeting in the past
okay.
to discuss stuff. It's just at the
That's
time we
great.
couldn't find a way forward, really.
Sure.
But they were keen for collaboration and in fact joining forces essentially.
Yeah, then it probably would make sense. Because then keep this one the same and keep it as SaltStack formulas, especially since you've got so much here. And whatever we need to formally get in place to use that name, I will work towards, because we've said that that's okay. Tom said that that's okay, Tom Hatch. And so I will make sure that you have that. I'm not sure what that looks like today. So I'm still traversing the VMware world of what I need to do. And I will take that on, but I think that that's fine if you guys have collaborated with them and you want to keep that as salt formulas, because that's what we tend to call it. And even in our documentation and in the salt project documentation for salt, we go back and forth between salt stack and salt formulas. And so we can also clean up and do a better job there.
Right. If we did ultimately decide to go with salt stack formulas, that wouldn't be a problem.
No, that wouldn't be a problem either.
Okay, so we just need to make a final decision amongst ourselves. And I think
Yep.
just go for one or the other. That's probably the only real options available to us, I think. Yeah, I think that's what we should do.
Sounds good.
Okay. I've got a few other little things to do before going back to some of the documentation stuff I wanted to talk about. So one of the things that came up actually while I was doing this is when I was converting the automatically converting the RST files to ASCII doc files, I was finding that a lot of the headings were getting messed up, and that our RST check that we're running wasn't actually catching it. I spoke to David about that during the week. So where am I? I'm not in my normal thing here. So what am I doing here? Where am I? Completely lost. I want pipelines. Let's see, template, hopefully. No, any pipelines will do. Right. So in our pre-commit check, anywhere, hopefully, if I get to one. Right, let's get to one there. We're using RST check, and in my little investigations, like I said, the headings weren't working, and I was messing around with Koala Lint, or Koala Bears, I think it's called, instead, and that was working. So where is it? Here you go, this one over here. And this one was working, and David pointed out that they're actually using a different, what one was it? Do you remember what it's called, David? The one that they're actually using under the hood?
RST Lint, RST-Lint.
Yeah,
Or,
actually,
well, it's got a longer name, restructure text -lint.
Yeah, I think it's this one over here. Yeah, this one. And we were thinking about integrating this with pre-commit instead, because this one's working out a bit better. The only thing is, when I looked into it, there was an issue here where the actual pre-commit author was trying to integrate with pre-commit, but the author here of this linter wasn't very keen on doing that. I think it was 51. Where is it?
Yeah, I should jump in, Imran. I've just set up, or I'm working on a mirror of it.
Okay.
With the configuration that's required.
Excellent. So how did that work out? Was it from that PR? Yeah.
Bear with me. I've got to go to the door. Sorry.
Okay, but basically you've got another option available for us there. Yeah. All right. I think he's disappeared, but yeah. So we'll get this one working instead, and that should prevent some of the problems we've had when we were trying to convert the automatic conversions of these files, the RST files, to ASCII doc, because it's being done across all the formulas that we've got. Oh, you're back, yeah. So you were just saying?
Yeah, I followed what the guy has done in that PR that you pointed out.
Yeah.
But there's a way of doing it where you sort of mirror the repo.
Yeah.
But add one file basically.
Yeah, it was mentioned down here somewhere, wasn't it? That it could be done, but you've done that for us, yeah?
Well, I'm working on it. I haven't totally finished, but I've done it significantly.
All right, great. So we can look forward to that, hopefully at some point in the future, and that'll save us some grief. That'll save some grief basically with these conversions that we're doing. All right, and while we're here on this, on these pipelines, because there's some other things being introduced in the template formula, or Noel was asking for the other checks to be added in. I was thinking about using the needs keyword, because what it is, we've always had this question about, let me go to the salt stack formulas version of this, it'll be better. Salt stack formulas, because I want to see the whole pipeline laid out in front of us. If I can get to one, right, there's one. What we've got at the moment is things are running in stages. So the whole lint stage will complete before the test stage completes, before the release stage. And a question I had is, can any of these tests start running before any of these linters complete? Like, is it absolutely necessary that commit lint blocks the whole test stage from running, or should it block the test stage from running? So it's just a question I've got out there that I want to discuss a little bit, because we can get around it in GitLab.
Well, what I would say, I mean, commit lint doesn't affect the sort of running of the test. I think this is the point you're making. So yeah, so the tests don't need commit lint to pass. But then something like Rubocop, if Rubocop, actually does involve the testing infrastructure that we have. So if Rubocop fails, it's almost pointless running the tests.
Yeah. So I think the only one there I can see right now is commit lint. Is we don't want to stop the test running if commit lint fails.
No,
is that correct?
Because it is useful for the test to run, even if the commit message is not formatted correctly. Yeah,
so just to confirm, we want pre-commit to run and Rubocop to run, and those have to pass. Commit lint, if it doesn't pass, still let the tests run. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, well, it's a good place to start. Yeah.
Sorry, did someone else say something? I think someone else joined, and
was Daniel going to say something?
Commit lint doesn't have to pass for the rest to pass, but pre-commit and Rubocop should be okay for the rest to execute.
Yeah, so we're saying make sure these pass first before letting this test stage start. But otherwise, if commit lint, even if commit lint doesn't complete, just start the tests. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, why not?
Okay,
but,
good.
But there's also, you could technically split up the pre-commit checks, because some of them affect the code and some don't.
Which ones would you suggest? So
well,
if I look down here
for
quickly,
example, the RST check isn't going to affect.
Yeah, the code.
Exactly.
So how would you want to do that?
If you really want to go into sort of granular.
I don't think we need to go that far just yet, because they're not exactly running slowly. But it just crossed my mind because of that PR that Noel put in as well. And when I was looking at this koala bears thing, I was thinking we've got quite a few linters now, and we don't need to be stopping the tests if some of these fail. And this is mainly Rubocop and shell check, YAML lint, salt lint. I mean, these are, I would say they're quite important. They should be fixed before the test run. It's just this over here, and that takes nothing to run. So I'm not going to worry about splitting just for this. But I think at least we can do the commit lint for now. And if we do merge in the PR in the template formula, I can't remember what it's called now, what was provided, but that would be another one which it's not important for the running of the formula. It would just be a side issue. So again, that one could be allowed to fail and not block the test from running immediately. But I think we're in agreement. We're suggesting the same thing, which is good. So that's another little point covered. And another little point again is that I'm quite lost because I'm not in my normal account here, but I'll get there. Just give me a second. Oh gosh. Okay, I'm not going to get there like this, am I? Right, let's go from there. And it's under infrastructure, Salt image builder. We had a nice PR over here that came in, or MR, I should be specific, which helped fix Gentoo and also fix Arch Linux. So we haven't been building a master for Arch Linux for a long time, but after the merge request was after it was merged in, we're now able to build a master across for Arch Linux as well. And I've pushed that across to all the formulas. So where the matrix was mainly doing master builds except for Arch. It's now doing all of them. Whereas we weren't able to do that before. So it's just a little point, but just saying is if you are doing anything with formulas and you're getting a matrix that's being changed, we can now stick to the master builds for all of them. We don't have to do, Arch was only on 3003.0 before, but since we've got the master available now, it's basically the matrix is now master across all platforms. So I just wanted to share that info.
Okay, when you say there was a MR
Yeah,
merge, was that from you or from another person?
No, we've got someone who provided Gentoo at the beginning. So if I go over here, so this contributor over here, who's been coming along and providing, fixing up some things in Salt Bootstrap as well. But while fixing up Gentoo, has able to fix up some of the things that's going on with Arch Linux as well. So that's been very, very useful. That's where we got Gentoo from in the first place, from this contributor. So that's been going on for a little while. He's been helping out over the last few months. That's where that's come from. But just the main point is we can use master now across all formulas. That's the main point I just wanted to raise over there. Right. So that's the little things out of the way. The main topic now is going back to this documentation. And I just want to go across some of the angles of, some of the ideas now behind before we actually deploy this. And the main part of what I wanted to bring up was, if you see here, I didn't go into it last time, but we've got explanations, guides, references, and tutorials. Now, where I've taken that from, I've got this open in another tab, is I found this with the Divio people first. They deal with Django stuff. And there was a really nice discussion about how documentation should be structured, breaking it up into quadrant or into quadrants. So what it is explaining that rather than just having documentation that tries to just do everything in one page or whatnot, is you have your sections where you have your learning materials, your studying stuff on one side, your working stuff on the other side, and how you go through this and separate it all out. Now, the person who's actually devised all this, there's a video presentation there where he's actually explaining it, which is a quite nice presentation to look at. This is the actual main framework behind all of that. So this is behind the Divio is actually this. And just having a quick look through this, just highlighting some interesting bits. So again, it's that grid over there that we're using, or that I'm proposing that we use for our documentation. And let's just get to some of the interesting bits. So for example, let's get to right over here. So in terms of the characteristics, the types of documentation you'll have, the idea is the tutorials are there to, and it's always looking from the user's perspective, because obviously the documentation is written for them. So the idea is, can you teach me too? That's some of the materials that you need to provide. Some of them are, how do I do such and such? Another one is what is, and the last one is why. And by separating documentation like this, and this has actually been implemented in quite a few organizations, as you'll see if you was to link through to some of the people who are actually using it, it really brings a lot more clarity and a lot more focus to the documentation that's being provided. And again, so these things, they lead to different orientations, whether it's learning, whether it's tasks, information, or understanding. And the actual form of the content, how do you formulate your documentation, what structure you place there. So the tutorials are more like lessons, how-to guides are like steps, references are of course just descriptions, and the explanations is like almost like further discussions you can have with respect to that. And they're explaining what happens when it all goes wrong, when it collapses and stuff. So going into each one in a little bit more detail. Again, I'm just scanning through these quickly because obviously you can go through these things yourself in more detail. Let's have a look down here. So in terms of, there's steps here where it tells how to actually go about writing a good tutorial. and what not to do as well, not to put too many of the other areas into it, or in fact trying to avoid the other areas altogether. So these are the sort of things you try to do with tutorials. And yeah, this is quite interesting. So the language that you actually use within, so if you like a style guide that we can hopefully adopt if we agree upon this, is these are the sort of statements that you'd expect within the tutorials that are provided within our documentation. And the same thing has been done, and the differences as well is what differs, between a tutorial and a how-to guide, and what are they trying to achieve. And again, that difference has been laid out over here, making it very clear how we distinguish between the two types over there, because it can be very easy to blend between all four of them. And that's what you want to try and avoid. You want to try to make each thing a very specific thing in each area, just to make it easier for the users to actually work through the documentation. Because I think if you look at some of what we've already provided, we have mixed a lot of things into maybe one big page of documentation, which then end users find quite difficult to use and they can't really work with. But splitting it up into these sections should make it a lot easier. And again, explaining the types of language that you would use within it. And it's done for all the four areas. Again, because I don't want to waste too much time on this in the sense of reading it all, but just giving the examples of what types of things it would involve. So let's have a look. If we go over here to this over here, if we were trying to plan out roughly following this, how you would actually provide this, these are the four areas as we've looked at. And the way I sort of see it is we have general documentation, which applies to all formulas. And then we have, say, specific formula-based documentation. So each formula would have its own section of these four sections within each formula as well. And if I could give some examples of what I'm suggesting is, just give me a second here, I need to pull it out. So the obvious one, for example, for an how-to guide, and this would actually probably apply to all formulas in some shape or form, is how do I use this formula? Or how to use this formula. So that's that usage guide area that we were discussing in meetings, some meetings back. Another one in a more general sense is we have issues of how to use kitchen testing locally. Because I think that's quite difficult at first when I remember when I first started trying to use kitchen, I didn't really know where I was. There was no guide, there was no instructions. And I think it would be really useful if we can explain, and I think some of us do it differently, and it would be good to have those differences out there as well, because something might suit someone better than, a method I might use might not work so well for someone else. We can also split this one into two, for example, because we have a Docker-based one and we have a Vagrant-based one. So maybe the Docker one would be the main one because that's obviously the majority of our testing, and the Vagrant one almost kind of builds on top of that anyway. But that could be two different guides there, is how to take advantage of those things. In terms of some of the reference materials, I see a lot where there's a lot of stuff I have to keep returning back to, looking with whether it's within some of the stuff I've already done or across the organization, is, certain things that are done again and again, and especially a lot of things to do with platforms. So even simple things like platform grains, just having them in a table somewhere, I think that's incredibly useful, rather than trying to calculate or work out what exactly was the grain, because sometimes there's uppercase letters that they begin with. I think it's the OS finger, for example, might catch people out, but having that somewhere where it's available for people to just grab hold of. Another one would be, for example, when you're using inspec, what the actual types are seen as. So for example, the platform family and the platform family even, and the platform name and those sorts of things, so that when you're writing your case statements, we can just go back to the documentation and know for sure especially with our new library that we have as well, that obviously Daniel's provided, is what values can we rely upon, or can we use within our case statements to get our inspect tests written quite well. In terms of explanations, so I'm suggesting some of these, but I'm hoping to get some brainstorming from all of us together about some of the other ones we can also look at. Is a general one I see over here is there's a question: why do we avoid? Can you see that text? Is it very small? Interdependencies.
See it.
I can read.
So there's something that has come up in the past, is because we obviously avoid this across our formulas, but why do we avoid it? Interdependence. Oh, I can't spell now. Dependencies. I think that's an important question where people might need to know why we're trying to avoid that, what the reasons are behind it, and it goes into the history of the organization and why that decision was taken and why we're upholding that decision today. Yet at the same time, there might be a separate discussion, which would be how do, or let's say it's formula based actually. Let's go into a specific formula. Using the Postgres formula alongside in the Zabbix formula, because I know Zabbix formula uses Postgres, and you might not want to recreate all those states in Zabbix, but you could have, a discussion about how that still could be done at the end user's side. So if they want to do that for themselves, how can they utilize these formulas that we've got available and put them together themselves? So these would be some of those. The one I've struggled with a little bit, and I suppose that's just the nature of what we're doing as a formulas organization, is what would the tutorials actually be? Like, I can't see what we're actually teaching people. Are there lessons that we have to actually teach people at the beginning? So, I mean, that's a question I'm asking, the rest of the group here is, would there be tutorials that you can think of?
Yeah, because I mean, it's not completely obvious how you would use a formula.
So would that be some of the stuff that's already in the salt stack formula, the salt stack documentation about formulas? Would that be where some of the tutorial material would come from? Because that general material that's already there.
Well, I think there's a page, isn't there?
Yeah.
On it.
The main formulas page in the salt stack documentation. So would that be maybe some of the? I guess one of the tutorials would be how to set up your environment in the first place to use formulas.
Yeah. So general
that'd be
one, yes.
Yeah. Setting up your environment to use formulas. So do you get the idea of just breaking it down and separating things to make them a little bit easier to work through? So there will be the specific ones per formula, and there will be the organizational ones. Another one up here as well, maybe a reference, is to do with obviously our documentation itself, like ASCII Doctor and Torah. That will be another area which needs some documentation, because it might take some time for people to get used to how to use these things. And there are snippets that I already have available, for example, that could be shared to make it easier for people to write the documentation in the first place. So is this idea a good way to sort of start out our documentation?
It seems as good as any, or even better, certainly better than random.
Right. I mean,
it's a good way, I think, and we can find something like this in the actual SOL documentation, right? We have some guides, some tutorials, and some references.
Right. I haven't maybe dug down deep enough. I've seen a lot of reference material. I guess that's what I mainly look at. I haven't really paid attention so much. I guess the new SALT user guide has a lot of that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, good documentation will have that. The idea is not to mix it all together. That's one of the big strong points that they're making. Some of the arguments is when it's all mixed in together, the documentation becomes much harder for the end user to actually benefit from. And I'd like to propose a fifth one here, which I think is actually unique to us a bit. And I don't know what to call it yet, but it's kind of like a user experience where I think writing in these sort of structured formats might be a bit tough for most people to make the time to actually do. This will take some effort to actually write very specific, guided documentation. But I'd like to just have one area where any user of any formula can just provide how they use that formula, how I use this formula, or along those lines. And I think that would be fantastic documentation as well. So even though it wouldn't be any one of these specifically, it would just be another layer to showing, because someone's use of that formula may be a way that you've not even thought about using it, and their experience with using it over a number of years brings something to the table that you haven't thought about before. Because formulas are quite powerful, actually. They do quite a lot of different things. And I would love to know how people use that formula before I started using it. So I think having that as a fifth section would be quite useful as well.
Yes, I agree. I see some other project doing that as feedback, user experience, and they populate their blog with users' posts. Actually, they ask the community to write articles to post on their blog, and it has two useful purposes. The first one is for users to explain what they do, and the second one, and make publicity. And the second one is to show how the product can be used and how it's versatile, etc.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I completely agree about the user experience.
I think this might also answer what you were asking 2 weeks ago about an area for blogs, because while it might not be technically a blog, it may be a way you can sort of almost blog that information out as part of your user experience. And that might be separated into two. There might be, an end user, and it might be an actual formula developer. So they might have a slightly, different how I develop this or how I contribute to this formula. These might be separate experiences which are useful, and you may be both. And you may be able to provide two ends of the spectrum, but keep them sort of separate so that people who want to develop the formula or contribute to it can read more of those, and end users can just go straight to that and get that information, early on, so that they can get an idea of what you can actually achieve with the formula that's there. So we like that kind of idea.
I completely like it personally.
That's nice. I would recommend, if you can get on to it's not very long at all. It's, very, very short. I just don't want to obviously read it out throughout this time over here. They're very short pages, but they explain it in great detail and bring lots and lots of arguments as to why it's important. The video is very good as well. The video that's linked over here. And like I said, it's been adopted by the Django project. It's been adopted by Divio and many other places as well. So let's have a look who else is using it. And some various other organizations as well, as you can see here. And I do believe while we're at the beginning of this venture, it'll be much better if we put that into place now rather than try to adapt later on. So going back to this over here, this is a structure that I've already been sort of working with. But if I now push this structure, this basic structure, so it's ready to go, where people can just immediately go into, I think I've got one here with the apt formula. I don't think I've got it in this. I think it's in my development side. But what I've done, I've sort of shown how it would actually expand a bit further. Actually, open it up now will take a bit of time. But if I was to push this out there now to the formulas, would that be an issue? Can I just go ahead with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead. So concretely, do you have some, how does it impact the README in each formula repository?
Okay, not at all. What we're doing, if I go to now, oh gosh, this is going to be so hard. Sorry, it's because I don't have things set up properly right now here. So I'm having to do it manually. Let's see if I pushed it. I don't know if I even pushed it here, but okay, so what the idea is, we have your docs formula as usual, and this is not the right branch. Let's go to the right branch. Okay, so you have your docs formula as usual, and the RST files are there as usual. We're not going to touch those. I did toy with the idea, and I did play around with the idea of actually changing these to the ADocs directly. So converting them changing them and using those as the main documentation, but it wasn't working out very cleanly. And I was thinking, there's no need to. These are like standard sort of GitHub side documentations where people want to get a quick look over things. And we can still pull those into our main documentation anyway. So let's leave them there. We'll convert these automatically at every during semantic release. We'll automatically convert these over to ADOC, and they'll be visible on both sides in GitHub as well as in our main documentation. Yeah, so these are being automatically converted from those RST files. Okay, at each semantic release run. So we have a YAML file here, an Antora.yaml file, which actually explains the structure of what we're doing. It's a very, very simple file, really. And I'll probably manage this with the SSF anyway. This has changed a little bit. So this isn't the newest version I've got, but I've got an explanation. So this, instead of roots, so I've got root over here, but I've got explanations, guides, references. So this root will change for each one, tutorials. And then we'll have separate, under this section over here where everything takes place. This one is one particular area. So this is one particular folder, which is roots, which is the most general information for that formula or for anything else. And this is the Antora structure anyway, so it will all be in place over there. But under modules over here, we'll have tutorials, guides, references, etc. And each one of those will have these folders in there. And what you do, you place your pages obviously under pages. So these are the converted ADOC files. And any images you place under there and you link them up properly. Partials are repetitive sections. So if you've got anything that needs to be used in multiple pages or just needs to be repeated within the same page, you can have little includes and you have them under the partials folder. Examples will normally be, if, for example, you've got a block of code. When I was, for example, doing the, where's the salt stack formulas one? When I was doing this Tufts pattern documentation, this block over here, which we were using macros.ginger at the time, if I can write this over here, this block over here, because I didn't want to include this whole section inline, I'm using it from the examples folder where I've copied the macros.ginger file into the examples folder, and then I've linked it in and it's pulling it into this code block over here. So any examples you have, big, longer things you can put under examples, and attachments will be things if we ever have anything that needs to be downloaded from our site for that particular formula or for the whole organization. So that general structure will be used. Like I said, these will change slightly. There'll only be one navigation document per section, which you'll see once I push it all out there. It's fairly simple, but that's it. It all goes underneath the docs folder. And the only thing you see in the docs folder is the Antora.yaml. The rest is under this structure over here, under modules.
Okay, and should we do some modification in the README to comply with the Dixteria layout? Because each time I try to write some documentation, I always struggle with by which side I will start writing things, and splitting in different components, user experience, references, tutorials, etc. is a very, very good thing. But should we still have the complete list of states, etc. in the README? Or should we simplify this and with links to different parts?
I remember when we first discussed this, it was about 2 years ago. And the idea was people still want the GitHub documentation to stay the same, where you get when you come to a new formula, you just want to read the README. You just want to see that in front of you, because most people are quite used to how formulas run. People who use the organization, they're used to how formulas run. They just want this overview right now, like in front of themselves, and they just get on with using the formula. They don't need to see maybe the extended documentation. So perhaps let's just keep this the same, at least for the time being, at least until the documentation is maybe a bit more established. And then maybe things like this can be taken out, because this is very general, this testing issue. That can be pulled out to the main documentation and we can link it there. But as for these states and stuff, I think for the time being, I think there's no harm. It's probably better just to leave them there. And like I said, these are visible over here anyway, because as soon as you go to, why am I doing this? I can search from here now. I don't need to do this. So if I go to available states even, I haven't spelled it right, but it still found it. You know, these will still be shown over this side anyway. People will be able to see them because this is automatically converted to the ADOC each time we have semantic release run. So they can see it both sides, but I think let's keep the RST files the same for now on the GitHub side, and any specific documentation we'll place under this structure here, which will be, you know, modules / explanations, modules / guides, etc. And you just put your pages and keep them nice and small. I think what I like is keeping everything in units, and you can always link the units together. But if you keep them in unit explanations, it becomes easier to review, it becomes easier to work through, and Toro will give you, you know, these navigations at the bottom anyway. So if you just put them in a line, people can work through very small pages and read through a page and work through the next page by just simply, you know, hitting next and work through all of what you're providing.
Okay.
Yeah, once it's out there, I think it'll be easier to understand. Once we get a few guides and tutorials or whatnot out there, it'll be a lot easier to see what we're talking about. But yeah, please, if you get a chance, just have a look at this site over here. You can get there from either side anyway, or just see it in the. I can share that link maybe somewhere in Slack or something so people can see that. But was there anything else about the documentation? I did have one more thing, I think. Just 1 second. Okay, no, not at the moment. I can discuss that next time. Get some documentation out there first, perhaps, and then we can discuss a bit more detail. Any questions about this? I mean, if there's anything I can quickly answer now, seeing the whole thing.
No, I mean, I would have to have another look at it in detail, I think.
Okay, how do you suggest we finalize this domain name thing so that we can get on with that as well? Do we just decide amongst ourselves now, or do we, you know, open up in Slack?
Well, I think
The
the
domain
first
name?
thing,
The domain name that we're going to use.
I think the first thing is to have to ask the other organization if we can use salt formulas. Is that where we're going?
Yeah, we could.
I agree.
Yeah, we could do that definitely. I think we'll have to do it through Slack at first. That's the best way to contact them. I can do that. I can ask them what they think. But then should we ask amongst ourselves as well what the rest of us think as well? Just get that confirmed.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the meantime, I'll definitely get this pushed into the formulas so that this site is working, you know, with the live data now.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as we're ready, you know, we don't have to start advertising this just yet. We can slowly work on it in the background. But once we're ready, we will change the domain over here, and then we can properly, you know, make it clear that this is our documentation site that we're now working towards, you know, whether it's docs.saltformulas.org. So let's see how that looks. Docs.salt. I'm not very keen on salt formulas personally. That's just myself because I'm just so unused to it. I'm just so used to seeing salt stack formulas everywhere. But that's what we're suggesting will be the URL.
Well, I'm not suggesting anything. I think. I mean, I'm fairly open. If you think, or if we're happy that salt stack, we can kind of stick with it for several years, and I don't have a problem with that. As long as we don't get to a point like in 1 or 2 years where actually, oh no, you can't use that name now.
Is that the main thing that's stopping us? We're just not sure what's going to happen in the future.
Well, that's from my point of view, yeah.
Yeah.
Daniel,
And
any thoughts? Go on.
Yeah, personally, I really like the saltformula.org because there is few letters to write.
To write, yeah.
Yeah, and but I'm fine with the other one. If the other community is fine for us to use the saltformula.org, I will prefer this one over the other one.
Yeah, I think that was the majority. When I did speak to everyone, I think everyone preferred the short. I was saying let's go for SSF. let's go really small, but that domain was costing was it $20,000 or something? You know, for the first year. I can't remember what it was. Something ridiculous.
Maybe more than that.
It's not really readable now. SSF.
It's true, but it's very short now, isn't it? You'll be able to type it very quickly.
Well, we can always have aliases if we really wanted.
Yeah, of course. So, like you said, we've got a process there. We should maybe talk to the site formulas people anyway, just to make sure we're on board together with the same idea, and talk to the rest of the team, and then go for the domain after that. But at least get the documentation site up and running and make sure it's working the way we're expecting first.
Mm-hmm.
It was a nice job.
So I didn't catch you?
Yeah, great job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks. All right then. So we'll catch up in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, cheers.
See you.
All right, cheers. Bye-bye.